Welcome to the Will List Podcast again. Happy Wednesday, my good peoples. Happy Wednesday. After work show. Give y'all a little something. This is the Will List Podcast. The Delectable Negro Show. This show is very uncomfortable. I'm going to let y'all know I'm trying to loosen up because this show is going to get very uncomfortable for us all. Delectable Negro. Did that come in up right? Yeah, it did. Yeah, it came in right. This book is extremely heavy. I'll give you a little rundown. I think I talked about it previously. You can catch my previous shows and check it out. But it's gonna be a tough one. Let's get into it because we ain't gonna really like how uncomfortable this is, but we're gonna do it anyway. Trust me, it's educational. You have to understand the history of America. You have to understand the history of how much you do not understand nothing about history at all. You just don't, because you believe too many these things that a dominant society tells the people that didn't dominate. So you can't always listen to a culture that has overlaid themselves on top of a actual indigenous culture that existed before the arrival of foreigners. So let's get into the Delectable Negro, human consumption and homoeroticism. We're not going to go through the whole book, but we're going to hit some real hot points. So we're going to try to get through this. The introduction is extremely, it's literally talking about master eated me when I was meat. That's the introduction. That's page 1. That's not even getting into, chapter 1 is cannibalism in the transatlantic context. So before we go to chapter 1, let's delve into this introduction. Editor's notes. I don't want to read those. We want to get into this introduction. The foreword done by E. Patrick Johnson. Let me read you a couple of paragraphs. This is a pretty long one, so just bear with me. The Delectable Negro is a provocative reading of race relations. This is vis-a-vis and almost indiscernible homoeroticism in the 19th century. According to Woodard, such homoeroticism was always already there, but by contemporary framing of homosexuality has obscured our vision. Moreover, he suggested that the absence of an inappropriate linguist apparatus, the death of historical documentations, and the lack of theoretical models, which was to advocate homoeroticism from extant historical documents, have all concluded to conceal the presence of the racial libidinal dynamic. Shaman, like Woodward, sharpens our vision by immersing himself into the archives while relying on Philip Bryan Harper tells the evidence of felt intuition to reveal the unsaid and the taboo hidden in plain sight. So basically, I'm gonna keep reading this. What is perhaps more enlightening and frightening, however, in this framing of homoeroticism and lightning desire, is slavery through cannibalism. Slavery through cannibalism. Woodward displayed cannibalism as more than just a metaphor. He describes the actual instances. Enslaved and ex-slave narratives, autobiographies, and WPA interviews of white liberals' consumption of black flesh. Thus, instead of the questionable DuBose framing as the most compelling problem facing the Negroes in the 20th century, Woodward argues that another question was already on the forefront of the Negro's mind in the 19th century. How does it feel to be eatable, consumed objects? A consumed object. Let's, oh boy. Yeah, y'all gonna have to leave me some likes in the comments on this, and make and do some comments because this is some serious stuff I'm reading. I'm not gonna really expound upon all that because I told you it's a tough read. I really don't even like this book, but it's a necessary. It's necessary to tell the truth about some of these. These are hard truths that they try to cover up. So we're gonna go into the next little snippet. What I'm gonna give here. We're gonna go into chapter 1 next. Cannibalism in the transatlantic context. Whew. So how this starts off, I'll give you the beginning of this, and we might go a couple of pages in, but just how it starts off is it's wild. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Europeans did not understand the context of which Western and Central Africans, regardless of their cannibalism and flesh harvesters. In 1849, exchange between Agostino, an African-born slave, and a selected committee of the House of Lords appointed to consider the best means of which Great Britain can adopt for the final extinction of the African slave trade. British interpreters questioned an African man regarding his belief in European cannibalism. British interrogators could not understand what had put the idea into the slave's head that they were being eaten. Are they eaten by their own country? Asked the British interrogator, as ignorant and suspicious of Africa as the new slaves were of the white world. In the expected rhetorical maneuver, the interrogator, in an expected rhetorical maneuver, the interrogator places the onus of the proof and an explanation of the African man, Agostino. The British man was willing to believe that the African culture practices led themselves into cannibalism, whereas his presumed that civilized European legislative processes, mechanisms of reasons, and critical inquiry rise above such cannibalistic accusations. Cannibal accusations. So I'm gonna go a little further than this. So check this out. Scholars of the transatlantic slave trade and the black experiences have tended neither to metaphorize or dismiss such examples of superstitions through the unfolding indigenous terrors. Scholars on the left of Atabenga, a pygmy man brought to the United States in the late 19th century and displayed as an attraction in the zoo, exhibits these tendencies. Benga is described by his biographer as believing that white men are cannibals, a fear ascribed mostly to superstitious Benga and the equally savage Apache chieftain Geronimo shared. So they talking about Geronimo and the Apache Geronimo the Apache, and they talking about this Atabenga who was from Africa. And here we go. This says Geronimo Shitbenga, who is portrayed as prone to childish pranks and witchcraft, and his pygmy-based cannibalism beliefs are thought to have no critical bearing upon the structures of U.S. imperialism and erotic consumerism. Oh boy. Erotic Consumerism. So not only were they raping, pillaging, mislabeling. I mean, it's pretty wild, man. This book is it gives you look at this, look at what they was doing. Look at this type of look at this imagery. Look at that imagery. Oh man, whew. That's in the intro. That was from the introduction, that page there. But I got to give you a little more because I don't want you to miss out on some of these little these daggone tidbits. Sex, honor, and human consumption, page 59. Cool. Lilburn Lewis, a Kentucky slave owner, owned a considerable number of slaves whom he drove constantly fed sparingly, and lashed severely. According to the abolished Lydia Marie Child, Lewis was a typical plantation owner who most of the local community probably respected and looked to as a model wealthy citizen in terms of his treatment of his slaves. In 1816, he would commit crimes against his slaves that would cause his community to ostracize him and pursue legal restraints. He committed suicide while awaiting criminal trial. It is hard to say from the evidence of George, a young, recalcitrant slave on Lewis plantation, was a favorite of Lewis, constantly choosing him, as many masters did, as an object of ritual violence and as an emblem of his manhood and noble social status. We all know for sure that George, like many, grew to despise and resist his condition of bondage. George provoked his master's penchant for punishment by frequently running away, in addition to disobeying. Sent to the spring one day to collect water into an elegant pitcher, George made a horrible mistake in letting the pitcher fall and standing by and watching it dash dashes to shivers on the rocks. As punishment for George's transgressions, his masters bounded him to a wooden plank in the manner of a butcher, quartering him while an axe, and cooked his several body parts and pieces of flesh over a billowing fire. So they gonna eat this man. In preparation for a ritual punishment, Lewis gathered all of the slaves on the plantation into the most roomy Negro house, bolted the door, and told those assembled that the design of the meeting was to teach them to remain at home and obey his orders. The ritual began when George's younger brother helped the master bind the slave to a wooden bench. George was called up, and the assistance of his younger brother laid on the broad bench or block. The master then cut off his ankles with a broad axe. In the vain, the unhappy victim screamed. Not a hand among so many dared to interfere. Having cast the feet into the fire, he, the master, lectured the Negroes of some length. He then proceeded to cut off his limb below the knees. Suffering besought he to begin his head. Oh, the sufferer besought him to begin with his head. It was in vain. The master went and thus until Trunk's arms, head were all in the fire, still protracting the intervals with lecturers and threatenings of like punishment in case any of them were disobedient or ran away, or disclosed their tragedy that they were compelled to witness. In order to consume the bones, The fire was briskly stirred until midnight. Sometimes in early morning, an earthquake materialized, shook the slave shacks, crumbling into the walls and existing in the fire. The act brought an abrupt halt to the master's activities, and the Negroes were allowed to disperse with charges to keep their secret under the penalty of like punishment. Oh boy, I told you this book is it's something pretty vicious, man. That's oh man. Y'all want a little more? Or do you get my point? It's a little rough. Give you a little more. Out of sex, honor, and humanity and human consumption. Cannibal Nation. The social consumption of the enslaved person was such a concern in the colonial United States that senators, religious leaders, and abolitionists hotly debated whether colonial America was becoming something akin to a cannibal nation. Among 19th centuries, abolitionists and other consequential persons, the central issue was not the liberation of unburdening of the African soul, but the moral implications for whites who were fast developing what many literally refer to as a cannibalistic hunger for black flesh. In the public domain where this debate took place, whites regarded human consumption as a dishonorable act, shame, national degradation, and widespread anxiety shaped the nation's depths. You know what I mean? It shaped the nation's debate, leaving no room for consideration for the secret code of honor that white men maintained quietly among themselves. Feeling the shame of national dishonor motivated Horace Mann to address the House of Representatives on February 23rd. February 23rd, 1849. The oration was published later as Slavery and the Slave Trade in the District of Columbia. Speaking before his peers, Mann spoke of slavery as contagion, a rampant virus that wounds our morals and religious sensibilities. He offers an allegorical example of a clean, unpolluted northern statesman traveled to the District of Columbia and observing how slavery has tainted and corrupted the white citizens. In his allegory, he called specific attention to the glorified purpose of white Americans as the race of men who God endowed with the faculties of intelligence. This describes the white American man as despoiled of the power of imposing the faculties as a result of institutionalized slavery, and makes references to a dynamic honor of shame impacted the lives of the northern white citizens who condoned slavery and the recapturing of fugitive persons. It is difficult enough to convince whites at the time that the brutal treatment of the African person also had an effect on the African person's heart, ambitions, and soul. Never mind trying a man does to bring the nation's and white statesmen's attention to the subtle motives and spirits. Oh man, undergirding in the relationship between the master and slave, missing the allegorical point. See, I'm gonna go a little further because this is how cognitive dissonance just develops This is how it develops. This is how it goes down. This is how that's how that develops in your mind in someone's mind's mental mind brain housing group. Okay, a tale of hunger, retold, ravishment and hunger, and F. Douglas's life and writings, page 95. Let's get there. Let's go there a little bit. What time? We at 20 minutes. Sure. Might have to do a part one and one and two. I don't want to bore y'all. I want y'all to understand this. A tale of hunger retold, ravishment and hunger. F. Douglas life and writings. So 95. Let's get to 95 here. Go a little faster. All right. Frederick Douglass described slavery more eloquently than anyone else has as a cannibalistic institution in images striking the poetically resonate. His depicted slavery of the North of the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, as a personified, stern reality, glaring, frightful upon us. Its robes already crimsoned with the blood of millions, and even now feasting itself greedily upon his own flesh. Slave traders, he thought, as human flesh mongers. In the context, Douglas described slave owners cultivated consumption, hunger, and starvation at all levels of social interaction. If it was not Aunt Katie, the cook on one plantation, was literally starving Douglas when it was a master punishing a hungry slave for stealing molasses by making him drink gallons of it until he sickens, engorged on the sweetness. Such examples proliferated in the Douglas works, including Narrative 1845, My Bondage and My Freedom, 1855, and The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, 1881. To my knowledge, little scholars analyzed, little scholarly analysts existed in the culture of consumption depicted in Douglas's narratives. Man, okay. So that was my little I'm not gonna give you the whole book review. I'm just gonna tell you, you need to, if you really want to know about more about this book, it's really a reference book and it has a lot of stories. They have made movies, a ton of movies from this book, The Delectable Negro. And because of it's literally it's homoerotical exploitative nature. The nature of that book is literally explaining how human bodies were consumed. That doesn't sound like a 3/5 person you was consuming. You sound like you wanted to become. You wanted to consume so much that you thought you can get some melanin and it'll start coming out the skin. No. You're sick. You just eat people. You just eat people. Man, this was okay. What we got? We read that about. Man, tell you what, I will do part two if you ask for it. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take a break for the day, and I'm gonna get off. I'm gonna go down and just get out of my office for a second, okay? I gotta breathe. I told you that book was heavy because you have to literally think about that stuff. And when you have an active brain like mine, you internalize it. So it's like, oh boy, it's a piece. It's a piece. So I tell you what, like I said, if you want part two of that show, leave it in the comments. I also got a couple of part twos to do. I got a couple of parts. I still got to do my part two on Pensacola and Columbus. That's definitely, Pensacola, from Pensacola to Columbus. You know what I'm saying? I got to do part two because there's a lot I gotta close up on that. But LB LeJuan Bland, here you go, brother. I did the book review for you to let you know what that book was about. It is. I mean, it was deemed by the government, from social orders, hierarchical social orders, everything. It's all implemented. It's all documented, man. It's a lot of documentation in there. So check this out. We're gonna get up out of here. This is the Wheel Is podcast, and I'm gonna tell you like this again: the wheel is yours. That's right. I gotta get this crazy stuff off my screen, man. What the hell people sending me, man? All right, y'all. Wow, wow, wow. What the hell? What happened with that, man? Gotta end the recording and stuff. Once again, the wheel is yours. Keep it fresh, keep it funky, keep it learning, man. If you want part two, tell me you want part two. I'm out.